A lot of you will have seen Emma Raducanu, some incredibly distressing scenes from her in Dubai last week. She was approached by a man close to the Dubai tournament site on Monday. We learned he exhibited what was described as fixated behaviour. That's a phrase used to describe obsessive, unhealthy and unwanted behaviour. Raducanu was given a letter by the man, which sources in Dubai told BBC Sport included his name and his telephone number. She opened that letter later in her hotel, apparently. Raducanu informed the WTA about her concerns after this, and tournament security teams were notified on Tuesday afternoon. However, the man was still able to enter the small stadium where Raducanu played Mukova later on that evening, and it was a small stadium. It was one of the outside courts where that match was taking place. And 2 games into the match, Raducanu became very emotional after, it turns out, seeing that man, who sources close to Raducanu had said she'd seen a number of times previously. It was incredibly distressing. Raducanu was hiding behind the umpire's chair shortly after seeing him. The man was taken out by security. The match continued. Raducanu played incredibly well in the circumstances. Actually had a set point in the first set, but did end up losing out in 2 close sets. She posted on Instagram on Wednesday saying, "Thank you for the messages of support. Difficult experience yesterday, but I'll be okay. I'm proud of how I came back and competed despite what happened at the start of the match. Thank you to Carolina for being a great sport, and best of luck to her for the rest of the tournament." Dubai police said the man was detained before Raducanu decided not to press charges. Following Raducanu's complaint, Dubai police detained a tourist who approached her, left her a note, took her photograph, and engaged in behaviour that caused her distress. A police statement read. While Raducanu later chose to drop the charges, the individual signed a formal undertaking to maintain distance from her and has been banned from future tournaments. Roman Kelicic, who coached Raducanu before she turned professional and returned to work with her in Abu Dhabi last month, tournament that finished a couple of weeks ago, he told the Croatian outlet Net that the man in question had followed Raducanu to every tournament since the Australian Open. That's Singapore, Abu Dhabi, Doha and Dubai. He said he had a strategy that was terrifying. He thought everything through, calculated it. And, for context, for anybody that doesn't know, Raducanu had a stalker convicted in 2022, a man that was stalking her shortly after her 2021 US Open win, stalked her at her house, her parents' house that she continued to live in. He was convicted and given a 5-year restraining order and community service in 2022. And there was a victim impact statement from Emma Raducanu that was read at the time of his sentencing. And it was incredibly distressing in terms of the impact that had had on Raducanu at such a formative age. I am so distressed by this story because, well, for very obvious reasons. I think we all are, aren't we? It's fantastically distressing, but I don't know where Emma Raducanu goes from here. How she can ever feel safe, quite frankly. Honestly, I don't know how Emma Raducanu is supposed to ever feel safe anywhere, let alone on a tennis court, which can quite often feel very exposed. I mean, it is bloody difficult for women to feel safe anywhere in the world. Growing up as a woman is a process of learning exactly how unsafe you are in the world. It's self-defense classes at lunchtime at school. It's being given a rape alarm at Freshers Week. It's being told to cover your glasses in pubs so you don't get drugged. That is normality for women, and it's completely metabolized. Add into that fame, and status, and already having had a stalker and existing in a sport that has the memory of Monica Seles being stabbed on court in 1993, so deeply embedded in its DNA. I'm at a bit of a loss for words for what I would even say to comfort Emma Raducanu, quite frankly, because, you know, I did a couple of interviews about this week on BBC Radio 5 Live and on BBC Radio 4, and a lot of questions centred around what can the WTA do, what can the tournaments do to better ensure the safety of players. And honestly, the answer is not very much, quite frankly, right? I think there are limits to what the WTA and tournaments can do. David, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I suppose the one point that was made in a BBC Sport article on this subject in the last few days was maybe the tournament needs to ask questions as to how she came across this person, reported that he was there, and then he's gained access to her next match. That is something that is concerning, I think. But I agree. I mean, listen, it is very, very difficult. But these are the sort of measures that they need to keep building on, I think, in order to try to do the utmost they can to make players feel safe. But I don't know. I in particular with her, because of the extremities of her success at such a young age and the fame that came with it. I'm always distressed by what happens if you. I mean, I'm not on Twitter anymore, but if ever I used to sort of compliment a result from Raducanu or make any comment about her, the reaction you would get would be amplified several times over to that which you would get for talking about any other player, certainly any other female player. The vitriol you would get really shocked me. I mean, vitriol on that platform shouldn't be any surprise to anybody these days, but that really did take me aback, that she was going to be dealing with something a whole other level of magnitude more than most, and it's bad enough for most. I mean, you only have to listen to what players like Sloane Stephens and Madison Keys have talked about in terms of what they receive online. I get really upset by thinking about it. I don't know how they cope with that, really. There was one line in that BBC Sport article from Stephanie Hilborn, the chief executive of the Women in Sport charity, which did slightly bother me. You know, she was. I mean, she made the point about how easy it seemed to be to get close to Raducanu, and I couldn't agree more with her about that. But she also made the point that there's a problem with the sport in inadvertently overexposing elite female athletes, which I get the point, but it bothers me that should be a factor to be considering in this conversation. Why should that be something that we have to think about? You know, surely players should be allowed to be whoever they want to be online, for instance, and have control of their own social media accounts and not have to think about it, and the tours maybe not have to think about it. But yeah, I don't know where to go with it either.
I know that Molly McElwee has done quite a lot of reporting on this over the years. She had an interview with Katie Bolter last year in The Guardian, where Bolter talked about being followed on a journey home from Queens once, and Danielle Collins has spoken to Molly as well about having these sorts of experiences. And I remember Molly saying to me that when she was hearing these stories by these players, you know, she was, as you would, expressing real shock and horror at it. And what she was struck by was how normalized it was for these players. You know, it's so frightening and horrible, and yet for them it's actually a very sort of normal experience in that way, because it happens a lot. It's a gross reality of being a woman, but also, as you said, a famous sportswoman sort of magnifies the problem. And, you know, in Molly's Substack this week, which is called "But Do You Actually Like Sport?" she had some statistics in there from the Office for National Statistics saying that as many as 1 in 5 women have experienced stalking in their lifetime. And, you know, it's to that point of sport as a wider reflection of society, and society has always been and feels like it is increasingly threatening and violent towards women. And therefore, you know, it's both really, really shocking that these things are happening, but also not that surprising. And as you said, the players that Molly's spoken to have kind of always said that they feel like the WTA does a lot. You know, they do have protocols that they're kind of doing as much as they feel like they can. I think with Raducanu's particular incident, it was difficult because it was a very rainy day, wasn't it? And that match ended up moving court, I think, at quite a last minute. And while people on the ground did have this man's photograph and were looking out for him, it was difficult to know where that Raducanu match was going to be. And he ended up there courtside. And look, maybe more could have been done, but I'm not sure that that's the root problem here. It's a much bigger, much wider threat to women in society, and sportswomen are really, really experiencing it as well. You know, there's a huge number of these cases across sports, and yeah, it's extremely, extremely disturbing.
Well said. Yeah, we're thinking of Emma Raducanu. Hope she is okay as you can be after something like that.